Hello, friends, and welcome back to Fishing for Men. It is great to have you here. This is Spencer, alongside a couple of my friends we'll introduce in just a moment. Glad to have you back as we round out our series on spiritual health. Hopefully you've been following along, and if you have, then so far you've covered a lot of ground with us. We've talked about physical health, we've talked about mental health, and last episode we talked about how we can create a new heart. If you haven't, please go take a listen. I think there's some great information in there. But today we're going to round it out. We're going to talk about the power of relationships in our spiritual health and how we, through our relationships, can really bring God's kingdom to earth. But before we get started, I want to introduce you to two of my best friends who are joining me today. To my left is my good friend.
Hey, it's Cody.
Hey guys, it's Billy.
We are so glad. We are the three amigos holding down the fort today while some of our other friends are out traveling while we record this one. And so we're going to do something a little bit different today. So if you're in the car, wherever you're listening, settle in. We got a little bit of a story.
Story time.
Story time. I'd like to tell you all, as we start talking about relationships, about the story of the lion and the mouse. So once upon a time, there was a mighty lion who was asleep in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. A little mouse came upon him unexpectedly, and in her fright and haste to get away, ran across the lion's nose. Roused from his nap, the lion laid his huge paw angrily on the creature to kill her. "Spare me," begged the poor mouse. "Please let me go, and someday I will surely repay you." The lion was amused to think that a mouse could ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, while stalking his prey in the forest, the lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's net. Unable to free himself, he filled the forest with his angry roaring. The mouse knew the voice and quickly found the lion struggling in the net. Running to one of the great ropes that bound him, she gnawed it until it parted, and soon the lion was free. "You laughed when I said I would repay you," said the mouse. "Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion."
What a parable.
What a parable. What do you guys take from that?
Oh man, I think there are times when there are certain people in your life for a reason.
Yes.
And they have a time and a place where they're going to need to come alongside you. And like that's where I see maybe there's an unsuspecting person that you never knew. We're going to be there to provide whatever support and care come your way during that specific situation. But that's where I see the mouse of like, yeah, right, you can't ever do anything for me.
Yeah. And that's kind of the heart of this episode is that, while it may not always seem like it, feels like every relationship we have, if we really look closely, can bring us closer to Christ-likeness. And so no matter how similar or alike we may be, we're called to love God and love people. And so in this episode, we're going to take a closer look at how we do that. And we're going to kind of use this as a feel-good sandwich, if you will, because we're going to start with love and encouragement. And then we're going to go a little tricky with unity in times of differences. And then we're going to close with this whole idea of how we bear each other's burdens in our relationship. So I think exploring these aspects of relationships is going to give us all, maybe, hopefully, a fresh perspective on which relationships in our lives are thriving and which ones might need a little bit of TLC. That's the goal. All right.
We got some of those.
Yeah. So let's start with a little soft. We'll kind of ease into the runway here, and we'll talk about love and encouragement. Who doesn't love the idea of relationships with love and encouragement?
I don't know. Is love easy?
Yeah, easy. I mean, yeah. That's why everybody has it. So the scripture that we want to really ground this piece into, it comes from Hebrews, and it's chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And it says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So this whole idea of meeting together and gathering in community makes me just curious to just have a little discussion with you guys around how has being connected to a faith community positively impacted your lives?
It doesn't start with your phone. We'll start there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's interesting because we talked about this in our Thursday morning Bible study 2 weeks ago about how we live in the most connected time ever in the history of the world. We can call anybody, we can text anybody, we can FaceTime anybody anywhere in the world at any time. Yet, how many people still take the time to actually get together face to face? As I read that verse, that not giving up meeting together, I kind of feel like the phone pushed us that way.
Yeah.
Oh, I can just pull up my phone and talk to them. I don't have to go over there. I don't have to get in my car. I don't have to take a trip over there, spend time doing that. I can just do this. But there's something different that happens when you're in a room like this, where you're face to face with somebody. And so I think that is the most interesting part. Kind of that verse to me. This is the part that sticks out. But to answer your question, I think I talked about this on another episode. I spent 2 years with no friends because we had to sort of go through that deconstruction of, are these people the right people in our life at this time? And the way that we want to lead and follow Jesus, are these the people that are going to push us that way? And for us, the answer is no. And so we had to kind of go through a 2-year period where it was kind of just me and Katie. And while that was awesome for us, like, you know, I love my wife very much, but we also talked about this. Your wife can't provide every need for you.
Yeah.
Right.
And so for us, we both need a community and recognize that. And the community that I have now is something that I prayed for a really long time, but just having those people that you can be open and be you with, and you can let your guard down, let your filter off. We had a little bit of session like that right before this of like, I'm just going to air all this out.
Yeah.
And then they can listen, they can advise, they can call you on your crap too, because that's one of the things that I've really used this community for. Of here's how I responded. I don't know if it's right.
Yeah.
Did I do this right, or what's your opinion? So that's one of the things that's been really valuable to me.
Man, that's awesome to hear. Anything come up for you, Cody?
Man, I just think of how before I had community like I've got it now, I just would go by myself. I mean, I'd crawl up inside of my own head and, be my own best friend and not ever let anybody know what was going on inside, push down the anger, push down the frustration. But yeah, being in community, it's like, you guys know me for everything I am, and, welcome the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Help me through, stuff that I don't have to deal with on my own.
Yeah.
And stuff that, like Billy, you kind of said your wife, but Paige and I, there's a limit to what she can help me with there relationally that you guys can
Absolutely
take over on. So
I love, pointing out like being in community. Yeah. And one of the ways it's positively impacted you is you see the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Cause I feel like there's a couple different faith communities I feel like I'm connected to, like the group at our church of youth leaders that I'm connected to. And that's what I thought would help me like kind of scratch that itch of like, I'm going to be part of this community. It's going to lead to this level of fulfillment. But I don't think that it did, not because of the community, but because I didn't really lean in. It was just maybe too big, and I didn't feel comfortable even vulnerable with a group that size. And I can still remember the day that sitting there, it was actually this time last year around November, where Billy asked me, he's like, hey, we should get lunch sometime. And I was like, yes, that would be awesome. Because that's what I was after, is like a small group. And it led to this group. And I think one of the big ways that I consider this obviously a faith community, because it's the first group of guys I've really been in where I feel like I can talk about faith openly. But the first time I saw the real benefit of it was, I'll never forget, I was sending a text and I just kind of alluded to not liking my relationship with alcohol. It was the first time I'd ever openly admitted that to a lot lot of people. There's people in my family that I've said it to, but
they laugh it off or something.
Yeah,
like,
and you're just like, I'm like wincing, kind of biting my teeth as I send it. Like, is this okay? And I sent it, and it was just nothing but love.
Yeah.
Back. So thinking about love and encouragement, and that's just one of the things. It's just like now feeling like, Cody, to your point, you got this place that you feel like you can just leave it, and it's okay, and to be you, and there's no need to do impression management with this group. You can just be open, and that is so nice.
Isn't it weird? Because isn't that how it should be?
yeah,
Right? You would think, yeah. But I think it's cool because as I was, Brandon's not here, so I tried to do my own little, Bible nerding out. But as I was diving into this scripture a little more, there's this word consider, and let us consider. And when you look at the Greek translation of that, what I think is kind of interesting is that it talks about looking intently or carefully observing. And I don't know about you all, but I just love that, like, it's such an outward focus. it's look intently on your friends, like look after them, love and encourage them, like look at what they need, carefully observe where they might need observation. And that's how you can, when you do that, it makes the love and encouragement so easy because you're looking for it more readily.
That's a really good thing, because you said earlier that, when you bring up something serious like alcohol or something like that, the first thing we all always try to do, a lot of people always try to do, is laugh it off, like make a joke or just, but anything but look at it intently. Anything but pause and just don't joke about it. Just let it happen and, see if the reality can come to the surface instead of just, covering over it like it's so common to do.
Yeah, there's been several times where that's happened, where it's been like, I'm going to share this. It terrifies me.
Yeah.
But here it is.
Yeah. And it's just freedom.
It is. And even, I think even in that whole of carefully observing is the people, so the other 6 guys being able to observe me and understand when I'm off. So several weeks ago, we did a retreat, and the Wednesday before, I had a rough last hour of work, and it like rocked my world. And I was at students, and Spencer's like, "You all right?" He goes, "Everybody laughed at this joke, and you were just like stone faced cold." And I'm like, "Whoa, was I? Like I wasn't." I thought I was hiding it well, but clearly I wasn't. And so Spencer's like, "Are you okay?" Yeah. And so I think that is also part of community, because we've been around each other enough to know what we look like as default of what we are normally. And so we can spot those times when we're like, "Hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Something happened?" And even though we don't want to, sometimes there's days where we don't want to talk about it, but sometimes we need that nudge to be like, "Oh yeah, hey, we see you. You're okay. If you want to talk about it, I'm here."
Yeah.
But we don't force it out of anybody either.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I think if you take that and you're like, so let us carefully consider, if we translate that in how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds, and not giving up meeting together, because that makes me think of what you just said about the phone. And for those like who might be listening, the big introverts, where that phone helps take away some of those social awkwardnesses, would you say that, like, I think about, could a faith community be considered a group that you're doing a Bible study with on YouVersion? Like we've talked about YouVersion. Is that a good dip your toes in, or do you all believe that it's important to have both? Like you can have a virtual and a digital, but you should have a group that you can be face to face with.
I want to be sensitive how I answer that question a little bit, because there's people in differing spots of their journey where they may have experienced some sort of really bad hurt from another person in a community before.
In a community,
and they're like, I just can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
And so maybe they have a really bad social anxiety or something like that. Yeah. And so maybe that YouVersion option is a way to dip your toes in and start that journey. I don't think it's the end all be all though. And that's where you got to kind of start to take it a step further. The way I kind of think about the phone in general now is it's sort of an additive to the community piece.
Augments.
Yes. It's not the sole provider of community. Yeah. It's an additive rather than, I think we've treated a lot of times of the sole provider. This is my community and I'll just use that.
Yeah. Love it. I think it's cool. Let us consider how, and if you go down there, we can carefully encourage one another. And I think that's one of the most important things. As we talk about spiritual health, it's finding, and especially in relationships, one of the ways that we can be more Christ-like is just by loving and encouraging others. I think that's one of the things, if you look at the story, Jesus, he was always doing that. No matter what you were bringing to the table, loved and encouraged. And then there's the tougher part of this, which is, what do we do in times of differences when you're
we don't ever have differences.
When you have that lion and mouse moment, and it's just, I'm so different from this person. There is no real common ground between us. What does Scripture call us to? And I really love this one because it comes from Ephesians 4, and it's says, I think it's 32 and 33. It says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. We're recording this on the heels of the election, and my gosh, if I could have had this as a banner, they're trailing behind everywhere I went, and everything you read. Oh my God! No matter.
Wasn't everybody humble and gentle?
Yeah, right.
Everyone was, for sure.
I mean, I think it's interesting because this is one of those like conflict, and is our goal to be right or get it right? And I would love, to just hear anything that you guys have done as far as how do you try and keep that gentleness in interactions or that humility that's referenced here.
I try really hard, but I suck at
it. Right?
When the emotions get high is when it gets really hard. Just to be completely honest. Like that's where it's like, even like I had a situation today where every part of me wanted to clap back with, you're wrong because of this, this, and this, and here are the things that you did that you are not considering, and make that person sort of crumble.
Yeah.
I didn't, but even then, my words probably could have been a little bit better if I was being completely honest in that whole situation. But it's so hard whenever tempers are flaring to gather yourself, to be humble and gentle and patient and bearing with one another in love. It's so hard to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Do you find it's easier with like a group like us to do that, or with family?
Neither. Because it's the ones that I love the most are the ones that I'm afraid to confront the most.
Yeah.
Because I fear damaging the relationship. And that's always been one of my things is like, the closer I am to you, the harder it is for me to like sometimes call things out because I value that relationship so much. And I tell a lot of stories about how if I confront that, they won't be able to handle it, or it's going to hurt their feelings. Yeah. Really, it's just excuses for me to not have to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's
really for sure. I feel like for me, it's hard. It's hard to confront like friends because there is that potential that relationship may go away.
Yeah.
I feel like with family, the gloves come off a little more.
Yeah.
Because they're family, and I'm like, you're family, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, that's not totally true, and it's just whatever I tell myself, but I think sometimes it's easier just to lash out and not consider that. So...
you're stuck with me. My blood, literally.
Yep. So
you're not going.
Here we go.
You don't like it, I'll see you at Thanksgiving.
Filter's gone.
Right before we started recording, we were talking, and there was a phrase that came up that I feel like for me is how I've really helped think about this, which is seek to understand.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this on an episode previously, but I feel like one of the anecdotes to conflict is curiosity. Seek to understand, ask questions, and that is one of the biggest things. Like when somebody comes at me, I wish I could say I do this every time, but asking questions to try and understand, or if I have a minute to prepare, like I have to, try and hold some accountability here. It's lead with questions first, trying to understand why are you behaving this way that is just so ridiculous without actually saying that, so that I can try and do that. Again, I do not do this every single time, but I think if all of us, if you think about our world right now and the people that you had differences, if you were to approach that without judgment and assumption, but with curiosity, what would that do? How would that change how you showed up?
Man, one of the things I'm trying to do right now is it's really easy to make up a story about a person just like if you see them, like walking down the street, depending on how they're dressed, what their shoes look like, what car they get in, what store they came out of. And what I'm trying to do is stop myself and ask myself, what's their story?
Yeah.
And not try to make up the story, but like if I was to approach them and just say, hey, what's your story? What would that conversation turn into, rather than me trying to impose what I think it might be?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that immediately changes the mindset and sort of the heart posture towards other people of, I wonder what their story is.
Yeah.
Considering others. I mean, I'm looking at the word bearing with one another in love, and that just I guess, is that getting inside of it with empathy and taking on part of it?
Yeah.
And then responding to them with that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that was one of those ones that I actually researched too in my pseudo Brandon moment, which is that bearing is really like, it suggests a loving and affectionate attitude.
Okay.
So it's not bearing like put up with you, but it's actually like a more compassionate, loving thing. Like, I'm going to bear with you because I love you, not because I tolerate you.
And I like that compassionate word too. This word compassion is not just a feeling.
Yeah.
It's an immense feeling that moves you towards action.
Yes.
Which I think we often forget that part of, like,
Yeah, a lot of people
action.
just think it's emotion.
Yeah, like, ooh, I feel compassion. Yeah. No, you feel empathy.
Yeah.
But compassion is this move towards action.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting there. I got a question. Oh, go ahead, Cody.
Which I was just going to say is not avoiding the conflict is not
Yeah.
the answer to
No.
doing that.
That's not love.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, that fits in well to the question I'm going to ask then. So how does tough love, quote unquote, fit into that?
See, I think it's how I live by the motto. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I can't stand.
And Spencer's really good at that. He loves words.
Right. Like, what I can't stand is when I hear people say, like, well, I mean, kind of like the old Talladega Nights. I said with all due respect. That doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want and categorize.
No
it as
offense.
tough love, or like tough love is like, I have to be authentic to myself. Like, no, that's just an excuse for you to be a jerk. So
Yeah.
I do think tough love fits in there if it's done, if you can clearly convey where it's coming from and why you have to hold that line of tough love. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, so maybe even better, like, how do you define love?
Well,
Because I think in our world, personally, I think we have twisted love to mean affirmation.
And only affirmation.
And only affirmation.
yeah.
Which Jesus loved the crap out of all of us, and he does not affirm
True.
so many things that we do.
Yeah.
Good point.
So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, something to wrestle with.
Because it's definitely not easy, because going back to the Greek and what that was initially meant from this, patient, the word that they use emphasizes endurance and long suffering. So if you break this down, what Paul's really saying is be humble and gentle, have endurance, and be ready for long suffering, but love one another, hold one another compassionately in love, and make every effort to keep unity. Think about the last time you were in an argument. Like, I cannot say it. Yeah, right. Like, how hard did you work to keep the unity or to have your point heard? Like, I just go back to, I'm not a biblical scholar, and there's probably a lot of people out there that are, I'm going to say this, and they're going to be like, actually, I can think of 10 examples, but I can't think of many examples where, when presented with conflict, it seems like every time Jesus had a question ready. Like, somebody would try and trap him, and he'd be like, well, who do you say that I am? Or just something like that. He was able to, the way he handled conflict was just so incredible.
Which I think is a good point, and something I'm trying to learn how to do is to actually, back to our seek to understand conversation, is respond with questions. I think in arguments we tend to make a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
And so, like, in my example today, I tried to answer back with a question of, hey, give me examples of how you think I did that. And it kind of forces that back to either, yes, there are very specific examples, or maybe I just said a bunch of words that I just felt like saying to poke the bear.
Yeah.
And so I think questions have a really cool way to disarm that a little bit, but also keep you from retaliating in the way that you may have been poked.
I love it. If I go back and I could sum it up and I could say, hey, listeners, here's 3 tips on if you are experiencing just relationships where it's hard to keep unity. Sounds like, if we're going to boil it down, number 1, curiosity is key. Seek to understand.
Yep.
Number 2, avoidance is not a strategy.
No.
That's never what Jesus did. Jesus doesn't call us to avoid it. It's actually, to lean in.
Blessed are
love.
the peacemakers.
Yeah, exactly. And 3 would be to strongly consider the words that you're using. We are called to be completely humble and gentle. Make every effort to keep unity. Do your words do that? So that's kind of the rubric, I feel like, as you think about relationship health and how we bring, again, going back to love and encourage, but also we are supposed to seek unity first, not being right.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Because more often than you're not, you may not be right either.
yeah, right.
How true.
And then we go to the one that can sometimes be counterculture, I feel like, for men in today's society, not to be super cliche, but, bearing each other's burdens. And it's so interesting how today it's like, you got to carry the weight of the world. Don't ask for help kind of thing. But Galatians 6:2 tells us the exact opposite, where it says, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. So helping one another is critical. We have to be able to do that if we're going to fulfill the law of Christ, which we're called to do. So I thought that one was pretty interesting. And I guess the question I would ask you guys here is, how do you feel like you're there? Do you feel like you're comfortable asking for help yet in the community that you're a part of? And what's been the key in like trusting to ask for help when carrying burdens?
I used to hate asking for help. Oh my gosh, I hated asking for help. I even remember, probably didn't even happen until 5 years ago, where I was like, oh, I need to start asking other people, because one, it is extremely exhausting to go try to figure out the answer on your own. Like, time consuming to try to go figure that out. Plus, the internet's a rabbit hole, so don't go down that path.
Yeah.
And so being able to tell myself it's okay to ask for help is one piece of that. But I think it's still some of that's still inside of like, I don't really need to bring this part up. And so I'm trying to get better about that, of bringing the situations to a point where even if I'm not really asking for like help or advice or whatever, like just trying to get better at, hey, this was a hard situation that happened today, and just get it out there.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. There's still days where I'm like, we're just going to shove that back there.
It's tricky. Yeah.
But I think what helps is how people respond.
Yeah. That affirmation, going back to the love and encouragement.
Well, even I would even say not even just the affirmation, but just the willingness to listen.
Yeah, okay.
And even part of it is also on yourself too. So like whenever I start to bring, like even the situation I went through today, I said, here's the response that I gave. And then I said, I'm not saying I'm right, so please feel free to correct what you may see that was off in this situation.
Yeah.
And just it's been a trust building exercise that's happened over a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Of doing that, and it's every time that happens, it makes you a little bit more comfortable to do it again.
Yeah.
But you got to kind of develop that trusting relationship before you can.
It's interesting.
Do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had this big, like the story that I've always told myself, I think one of my big blocks from like asking for help more than I do is I don't want to be an inconvenience to you. Like you've got your own stuff going on. I don't want to add this to your plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I get it. You're busy, like, and sometimes it's hard. Like in this whole group, I am the only one without kids, right? So it's like you guys have your own thing going on. Like I don't need to put my problems out there because you got kids galore. Everybody's got something, right? So it can be. It's interesting how like I will sometimes minimize my burdens because I tell myself they're not the same weight as my community.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one.
And so contrary to that, what do people usually respond when you say, I don't want to trouble you, but...
Yeah, it's no trouble at all.
No trouble
at all, right?
I'm happy to do it, right? We're like craving for people to ask us for...
Yeah. Because that's what I was going to ask you guys. It's like for me, somebody asked me one time, they're like, okay, well, let's think of it this way. If somebody were to ask you for help knowing... and you knew they could do nothing in return for you, how likely were you to help them? 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely I'd drop everything I'm doing and go help them, or a 1? And, naturally I was like, yeah, it was probably like an 8. And they're like, okay, how likely are you to go ask somebody for help knowing that you can do nothing in return for them? I'm like, oh, well, a 1. I want to be able to reciprocate that. And it's like, why do you feel like you have to? If you would be willing to do it for them, why aren't you willing to do? There's a contradiction there to your point, Cody. It's just it's interesting.
I think it's also interesting too that this group of friends that we have, one of the most interesting or meaningful times or fun times we've had together was helping Billy with his mulch.
A pallet of mulch.
He wasn't afraid to ask, and we all showed up over there, and we made a good time out of it.
What I love about it wasn't even an ask. It was a, hey, you're going to come help me mulch.
Actually, yeah, wasn't it?
Here's good news.
Yeah.
It's good news. We're going to do it together. Bad news. It's a whole pallet of mulch.
We got rewarded with crumble. That wasn't too bad.
But I think that's probably the other side of this scripture that I look at is there's number one, asking for help and carrying the burdens. And there's number two, being willing to put yourself aside to help carry that burden. And I think that's the easier part, but I do think it can be tough. Like, I don't know, like sometimes I wish I could say like, no, that thought never crosses my mind. Like, oh my God, I have so much going on right now, but I think what we're called to do is help carry those burdens. And that means you've got to be willing to create margin to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have meaningful experiences while you're doing it that you don't expect you're going to have.
Yeah.
You get to experience the love of Christ in a different way when you go serve somebody else.
Yeah.
In a way that you could never experience that love.
Yeah.
Because you're actually getting to extend it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And to watch that, even just the smile on somebody's face of, oh man, like,
Yeah.
hey, how could I, no, yeah, that's not the point here.
Yeah.
There's been a couple instances like that in my life where it was like, hey, I'm just going to help. I don't expect anything in return. And like, just to see how much it means to that person is really, really cool to watch that happen. I will say on the flip side of that, you also got to make sure as you're taking on others' burdens, you also have to care for yourself though.
Yeah.
Too.
That's true. That's true. You can't, it's kind of like, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah. And so that's why the community piece is big, because you have to be open to asking people for help and putting your burdens out there.
Yeah.
Because if you shove all yours down and then take everybody else's on, you're going to crumble.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like this circle of like, hey, I'm going to take yours and they're going to take mine.
Yeah.
It's like kind of this weird cycle.
Yeah. It's interesting because as I listen to us, it sounds like we're all kind of operating from this assumption of two things. One, you carry the burdens of people that you have close relationships with, and two, carrying the burdens requires some sort of Herculean effort, Yeah. But I don't know that's always true. Like I can think of multiple times where there's been community that even our Thursday morning Bible study, there's just been somebody who's had a need.
Yeah.
You don't even know them. You know that they need help carrying a burden. And you're like, yeah, I got it. We can help out. A mattress. Somebody needs help carrying a mattress. Who can help out? So that's interesting that if you're listening, please don't assume that you've got to find this close-knit group of friends and you got to help them carry their deepest, darkest demons. Like you can carry a burden.
There's people out of need everywhere.
Yeah.
Like we just got to open our eyes a little bit to understand who those people are that are in need or are hurting. They might be in your work. They might sit next to you at work. They may be the person behind the cash register at the grocery store.
Yep.
You never know where that person just needs to be seen, known, and heard and loved. And we get to provide that to people, which is a really cool experience.
Yeah.
Lots of good stuff. So, man, I'm sure we could probably continue to go on because just this power of the relationships, and really that is the outpouring and in our relationships is truly one of the ways that we bring the kingdom down, and we can practice that whole idea of spiritual health is through those relationships and what fruit we're producing through those, even the smallest of relationships, kind of like that lion and the mouse. So listeners, I hope as you've kind of been tuning in today that there's been something that's been kind of maybe tugging at your heart. Maybe it's the names of some people that have just been out there that have you kind of come up. I've always talked about these sections of love and encouragement, or unity in times of differences, or carrying each other's burdens. So, maybe there's somebody out there that could use your love and encouragement, and that's as simple as a text today. Or perhaps it's an individual in your life that is the lion to your mouse, or vice versa. That you're just we don't see eye to eye, and I got to put it on my heart to find some unity there, some common ground. Or maybe there's somebody who just could use you coming alongside to carry a burden. That's really our challenge for you today as we round out this series, is think about what does that relationship with that person need? If you've got somebody on your heart, What is it that they need? Is it just a simple reach out? Maybe you need to consider softening your heart there with, coming out of that position of patience and grace and compassion. Then we ask you to just pray for that. Think about those things. We tried to lay out a couple of things. Most importantly, not the tips we're giving you, but what Scripture says we're called to do in our relationships.
And prayer is one of those powerful things you can do.
Yeah.
Especially if it's people you don't see eye to eye with, like back to, we didn't even talk about this, back in the, times of differences, like number one, pray.
Change my heart.
Change my heart.
Absolutely.
You cannot have a hard heart towards somebody if you're praying for them.
That's
it's very difficult. Yeah. So pray. I
feel like that's just a blanket disclaimer. All of this, pray unceasingly in all of this.
And then go listen to our episode on prayer.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, but I feel like if we can do those, if we can look intently as we were called to do and reflect on what those needs might be, that's how we can identify those ways that we really bring this upside down kingdom to earth and just move closer to the Christ likeness that we're called. That is how we can be the mouse and the lion simultaneously. So friends, thank you so much for taking the time to tune into another episode of Fishing for Men. We look forward to you catching up our next episode where we'll begin a new series. Thank you and take care.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank y'all.